On today's Daily Detroit, indoor bars across the lower half of Michigan have been ordered closed because of the coronavirus uptick. Plus, a conversation with Jarrett Schlaff, co-founder of Pingree Detroit. Their worker-owned business has some big news from a pivot, one of the recurring themes of these coronavirus times. Plus, they're expanding. He joins us for more. And journalist Tiffany Ishaki of the Birmingham Bloomfield Eagle brings us the wild story behind Bloomfield Township leaders suing social media platform Nextdoor, as well as some of the township's residents. It's Thursday, July 2nd, 2020. I'm J.R. Stays.
And I'm Sven Gustafson. First, quick thank you to our treasured members at Patreon. Your help helps keep this project alive, and you can join all the cool kids helping us at patreon.com/dailydetroit. And thanks. Let's get right to it.
Big news from Big Gretch as the governor has issued an executive order closing all indoor bars across most of the lower peninsula of Michigan due to the recent uptick in COVID-19 cases. Says Whitmer, quote, "Following recent outbreaks tied to bars, I am taking this action today to slow the spread of the virus and keep people safe. If we want to be in a strong position to reopen schools for in-person classroom instruction this fall, then we need to take aggressive action right now to ensure we don't wipe out all the progress we have made," end quote. Every region in Michigan has seen an uptick in new cases in the past week. Nearly a quarter of all diagnoses in June were among people aged 20 to 29, up from 16% in May.
Whitmer's order does not include Regions 6 and 8, which cover the Upper Peninsula and part of Northwest Michigan, where coronavirus cases and infection rates have remained low. They also don't apply to outdoor bars or patios, or to brew pubs, distilleries, or wineries. The order comes after an outbreak in the Grosse Pointes that has been traced to a college bar in East Lansing called Harper's. There, officials say they've identified more than 100 coronavirus cases. At least one of those infected patrons later held a house party in Grosse Pointe Woods where the virus spread. WXYZ has also reported that Excalibur Park in Grosse Pointe Park was under investigation as a possible contact point for COVID-19.
Whew. Well, friend of the show, Brenna Hauk from Eater Detroit, had quite a piece on Eater Detroit about the Grosse Pointe Park stuff, the taproom voluntary closing down, all of that kind of stuff.
Right. And they were just basically doing it out of precaution, out of basically being concerned citizens and trying to squash any further spread of the virus. But, Jared, I got to say, at least here, sitting from here in Detroit, where we were always, one of the hotspots, the original hotspot of coronavirus infections in the state of Michigan, I'm just not sure who was feeling comfortable enough or brazen enough to want to go into an indoor bar and sit elbow to elbow with people without masks on, like inside. To me, that sounds like a terrible idea. I'm sure the view might seem different in some places outstate where maybe infection rates, were not as serious as they were here, but it just doesn't. You've been saying for weeks that you're not going into bars.
Oh, for sure. But I've seen the videos and, my phone has been buzzing for a couple of days on tips and people worried about this kind of stuff because not only do we have a situation where, people aren't wearing their masks and they're being indoors, but they're also I just have so many stories of people not respecting servers, not respecting the situation, just making a big deal out of this whole thing and making it just really uncomfortable and awkward. There's multiple thoughts that I have around this. There is a part of me that really feels for the bar owners that have put a lot of money towards these indoor reopenings. And who knows when we're going to see that money back. And I think it's a real sign that this, and I tweeted about this earlier today on the Daily Detroit Twitter account, that this is a thing and it's going to be with us for a while. And I wish it were a different situation. And I know that there's a lot of cognitive dissonance with folks going, why did we do masks if we're going to have this problem anyway? And all this other stuff. But I think there's just a general misunderstanding of what the United States got wrong and what Governor Whitmer is trying to get ahead of from a scientific perspective.
I saw somebody on Twitter posted something that I thought was really interesting. They said that essentially letting bars and restaurants reopen kind of unfairly put them in the position of being on the leading edge of public health here, right? Because it suddenly said, okay, you guys are enforcing public health protocols and regulations now. And We've seen it across the country and across Michigan, certainly, that patrons, have become combative and argued against, having to wear masks. They don't like it. They take offense to it and everything. And these are just restaurants trying to open up and find a way to do this and bring some money back in the door, but, do it at half capacity and everything. Like, my heart goes out to these bar and restaurant owners because, man, this is just tough. But if we don't do this now, then we, and get a handle on the coronavirus, then they're going to have to stay closed through the fall and winter. And then things are really going to get ugly. And we're going to start seeing business closures on a mass scale, I fear.
Well, we've already seen business closures on a mass scale. It could get even worse. There was a report that a respected local economist shared, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but they were talking about how 25% of small businesses have bit the dust in this whole situation, and they're never coming back. And if you keep this going on, this is a situation where we didn't respond to it. We've got, and to me, this is what's really telling about this pandemic. You've got a bunch of people, your grocery workers, your Amazon delivery drivers, your bartenders, your servers that are on the front line of this thing, and they're making the least money and at the most risk.
Right. And no health benefits, no less either,
Yeah, a lot of times these people are not even making health benefits. And it gets down to this whole thing of, that term new normal is kind of annoying, but I think especially with how we mishandled this, because if you look at us versus the rest of the world, it is clear the United States has not handled this in the same manner that the rest of the world has. This is where we're at now.
Yeah. Meanwhile, point out that Whitmer's order does not apply to two new laws that the governor signed this week. First is a new law allowing for to-go sales of cocktails from bars. The containers must be sealed, but now you'll be able to pick up some of your favorite drinks and take them home. This new law focuses on spirits and is over and above the to-go licenses that some establishments have for beer and wine.
Plus, microbreweries across the state can now directly deliver more of their beer without having to go through the state's complicated 3-tier distribution system. The amount they're allowed to self-distribute doubles from 1,000 to 2,000 barrels a year. In other coronavirus news, the state reported 262 cases and 4 deaths on Wednesday. That now brings the overall total to more than 64,100 cases and just under 6,000 fatalities since the beginning of the pandemic. Right now, the spread level of the virus in Michigan is an RT level of 1.25, which means that cases are growing and Michigan is one of the top 10 spreading states. In general, that means for every 1 confirmed case, you're getting that plus another 0.25 cases. Most of the country is now seeing the virus spread again in growing numbers. A creator of the RT.Live virus tracking project, Thomas Vladeck, tweeted, "If we're going to open schools in the fall, it's imperative that we crush the curve right now."
All right, let's get right to the first conversation of today's show.
Here we go. Pivot. 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 Pivot.
Joining me on the line is Jarrett Schlaff. He is the co-founder and maker at Pingree Detroit. Jarrett, welcome back to Daily Detroit. It has been a while.
It has. It's great to be back with you today, Jarrett.
I wanted to circle back with you because I was in Eastern Market and I saw that familiar Pingree name. And I, of course, enjoy the name Pingree and enjoy the whole story behind, what I think is Detroit's greatest mayor. But I saw you there and your table, it did not have shoes. Like, if people know, usually Pingree, you do a variety of things, but your signature product is your shoes. But no, I saw these face masks and, they were different than other face masks that I've seen. And I decided to pick one up. And I got to tell you, it was a great experience. So I had to pick up the horn and be like, what is going on with these new face masks?
Definitely. Well, thank you, one, for being a strong supporter of our Eastern Market. Always grateful for folks who stay local. And yeah, we literally, in March, we still are making footwear, but we kind of did a bit of a pivot from footwear to face masks. And actually, we started out where we did a collaboration with Detroit Denim and a couple other local shops where together we produced about 22,000 face shields for frontline doctors at Beaumont and a couple other locations, while also we started prototyping, developing a 3D knit mask. So there's a normal cut and sew masks, and then there's a mask like ours that's actually knit 3-dimensionally, where imagine 26 needles all moving at once, making a mask in one single piece. So the elastic is knit right into the polyester. So there's no weak point in the mask. It's formed super nice to face. It's exceptionally durable. So the earrings are not going to break down. You can throw in the wash dozens and dozens of times. It's going to stay there. And it's super breathable too. So it's breathable, comfortable, washable, and it protects you. So we really, we spent about 3 months getting the design and all the prototypes perfect. And we just launched it about 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, one of the things I thought that was interesting about it from the get-go was that it really molded to the face a lot better than something that you tie up or some of the cheaper stuff that, it's got the elastic things to it, but it doesn't last very long. And since masks are just like a regular part of life now, I actually have like multiple masks that I go through because, you got to throw stuff in the laundry and all of that kind of stuff. And so that's why I thought it was interesting because it just felt a whole lot more secure, but also it didn't feel like I, had that like hot breathing thing that some masks do.
Definitely. Yeah, we use the smallest gauge needle you can actually get on the market. So the holes are exceptionally small that allows for good airflow, but it doesn't overheat. It still maximizes protection. So when folks get a Pingree face mask, they're getting a workaround company made mask made in the United States with all American made materials. And there's actually zero waste in the entire production process of these masks. So it's sustainable as well.
Oh, wow. Wow. So one of the things that I realized when I wasn't seeing shoes on the table or, footwear, it seems like you found some success with the shoe wear and you kind of had a milestone you've hit.
Yes, this is the first time ever we've actually done a full sellout. We sold out of every single pair we could make through the end of the year.
That's amazing.
Which was super exciting. We, as most folks know, it takes us 2.5 days to make each pair. And so the cost of the shoe is the direct labor where, as folks might recall from the last conversation, 77 cents of every dollar in profit is directly shared with the workers on our team. So the money's going to the folks making the stuff and the materials sourcing from the United States. So even at a $349 price point, folks have seen value in a shoe that's going to last you for a decade that we can resole. And so we're really, really excited that the folks, we sold out of the 15 to 20 pairs we can make each month. And we're also in talks with, I can't name the names yet, but there are a couple of shoe stores that we're in negotiations with around carrying our shoes, which is super exciting. And that's going to give us the ability to kind of scale up in unique ways where we can potentially bring the cost down as we're making more pairs and we're bringing in other types of equipment. So it's an exciting time to be making shoes here in Detroit and across the country.
For sure. And I'll be sure to link that conversation in the show notes because we went and visited the facility in New Center and did a whole tour in the pre-coronavirus times. But I understand, well, even if we wanted to do a tour of that New Center facility, we can't anymore. And why is that?
More exciting news. So we were blessed and so grateful that we got to share space with the New Life Prosthetics for over 2.5 years. We shared space with them. They allowed us to kind of get launched in our footwear making there. But we outgrew the space, right? We were really, really constricted. We've been looking for a new space. And ironically, one of the pop-ups we did in the Eastern Market, we met our landlord, who was also a veteran, who was like, hey, I think I've got the perfect spot for you. And so we were able to move into a space. We're in the process of transitioning as we speak to a space in the Avenue of Fashion, right off of Livernois and the Lodge. So still in Detroit. It's about 3 times the size of our previous space. We're able to benefit. We got some really generous donations of some equipment from Shinola. So we're going to be able to do a lot more things that, we just couldn't do previously. When, you're doing a lot of stuff by hand, some things just don't work. So we're really grateful, and we're in the process of renovating and getting that space operational off of Livernois.
That's awesome. Is there any thought that you're going to scale up production, or is this to help fill like what you're doing? What are the thoughts behind the expansion?
So it's both, right? We're a design and manufacturing house. So one thing we're exploring, especially when we bring in tech, is, how can we both make products that is directly make our neighborhood stronger, that's creating living wage jobs, that's creating training opportunities for folks that might otherwise not have it, and things from footwear design to tech like programming the back-end engineering of a 3D knitting machine, which is an extremely complex process, but that we have the people on staff to be able to train folks on. We're looking at both being able to manufacture here in our shop here in Detroit, but also expand it out. There are beautiful manufacturing facilities all across the country. So if we're able to partner with folks, even to reduce their carbon footprint, if someone in New York wants to order something that we're making, why not be able to partner with other folks across the country and also collaboratively make and create. So we're really looking at the scale of how can we still keep in the States? How can we limit the footprint of things traveling? And how can we keep things local? And so we're really exploring ways to creatively scale in that direction. We're still able to create here in Detroit while also being able to scale without having to scale to have just one huge megalithic factory in one location. We see that as more antiquated, and we see the more localized, community-rooted production hub as more of a way to scale.
Yeah, one of the things I'm doing, and I'm asking people on background about what's going on with coronavirus and COVID-19, how has that shaped or impacted, your view going forward? And as a sustainable business that is also has a worker-owned component, how do you think that's impacting you, and will it be a long-term impact?
I think every small business is definitely having a hard time. They're having to look at how can they continue moving forward in ways that are authentic and that still allow them to exist without kind of jeopardizing or compromising their values or compromising why they did the thing in the first place. So for us, maximizing well-being for our workers, being a sustainable company are all critical to our ethos, right? And so, as we look to be able to both survive and thrive in this kind of coronavirus era, that's where we started looking at how can we also produce PPE alongside our existing offerings. Right now, that there's not as much of a demand for some of our leather goods. And we are coming out with some really exciting new products that folks have been asking for years. But again, previously we just didn't have the equipment to make them. So looking at things like billfold wallets and looking at journal covers that are different and then other styles of shoes. So we're really excited to move forward in that direction. And on the way there, we're really hoping folks consider us for supporting us and buying our masks, right, at $16.99 or $2 for $30. They're definitely at a premium price point, but it's because they're going to last 10 times longer than anything else in the market.
Yeah, for sure. Jarrett Schlaff, thank you so much for your time. You can check out all of his stuff and his team stuff at PingreeDetroit.com. We'll, of course, have a link in the show notes. Jarrett, thank you so much for your time, and congrats on all the progress.
It was good to be with you. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we are grateful to be in community with you.
Joining me on the line is Tiffany Ashaki from the Birmingham Bloomfield Eagle, and we're going to talk about something that I just found fascinating, and it's that Bloomfield Township and the Nextdoor social media site have gotten into an interesting tangle, especially in this world where people are talking about Twitter and Facebook limits. Nextdoor has a lot of reach on a hyper-local level. First off, Tiffany, welcome to Daily Detroit.
Oh, thanks, Jim. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So, bullet points, what is going on here?
Bullet points is hard to say because this, while it's just a lawsuit in front of us right now in an election year, coincidence, maybe not, maybe, this goes back nearly 10 years. It's a feud that goes on between two former board of trustees, and one of them was appointed to the supervisor seat to replace a retiring supervisor. And the treasurer at the time was not feeling it. He was upset. And it seems like there's been kind of like a house of cards vengeance ever since between them. And there's been all kinds of good stuff that's happened over the years.
And so what's happened now is that there's been a lawsuit filed dragging in Nextdoor. And if people don't know, Nextdoor is a site that has basically a very limited social network. The only people you can see are the folks in your immediate neighborhood. And I think in some cases, the neighborhoods next to it. Mm-hmm. And it's a place where, I don't know, as a journalist, sometimes I have found that there are interesting conversations. And then sometimes there is, I would say, people spread unverified information.
That's what is so good at the core of this story is because you can really see the opinions on both sides. And yes, I mean, Nextdoor, I'm a member of my own community's Nextdoor network, and there's some silly things that go on there, and definitely some falsehoods, but where is the line? Now, what's going on with the lawsuit is the Bloomfield Township Supervisor, Leo Savoy, and the Treasurer, Brian Keats, are suing Nextdoor for a couple of things. They're saying that a lot of untruths have been shared out there, that it's damaging to their reputations and to the township's operations. And they're also saying that there's actual monetary damages to be gained because the rhetoric if it's false, has misled voters into not approving a special assessment district last year to fund police and fire. So there were some, not jobs lost, the only jobs lost in the police department were through attrition, but they had cut budgets, and that is essentially because of what was said on Nextdoor, if you think about it, because that's where the new town square is.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, on a greater scale, because there has been a debate whether or not social media platforms are liable for what the folks on them post. So far, it seems that case law has been leaning towards that if you post something on a social network, you're liable for it. But say the social network itself, that's been a question that courts have wrestled with a couple of times, whether the network itself is just a carrier or just a platform for it, or is it liable for what you say?
There's 2 points there. And yes, there are 2 individual defendants in this suit. They're residents. So it's not just Nextdoor, because at first, I guess, Mr. Savoy and Mr. Keeps looked to reach out to Nextdoor kind of for a cease and desist. Say, please rein the people who are speaking mistruths in and the slander, just remove it from your platform. They heard nothing back. So they did hit a couple residents who were apparently particularly egregious with their comments. But also in journalism school, I guess you could say, and then during my career as a reporter, you always refer back to Xeron versus AOL, and that is a Supreme Court case where it was decided that AOL was not responsible for the content that people post in their chat rooms. And that takes you a really long way. So it's kind of like a newspaper might not be held accountable for something a politician says as long as there's attribution, which is how we have some of the politicians we see nowadays slinging some really interesting stuff out there in the media. And, papers are printing it because it's attributed. They're not held responsible for that.
Right. It's not their speech. It's not the newspaper speech. It's the speech of the politician.
Yes, exactly. So if Nextdoor were to actually be held responsible for what its members are saying, to me, does that go against the Supreme Court decision? Does that change the decision? Does that mean some things are up in the air? I don't know. But then you do have, the other end of it, which is this what a lot of people are calling a strategic lawsuit against public participation? So because those 2 residents have been sued, anyone worth their salt, Nextdoor included, isn't going to comment on pending litigation. So for one, they're talking unflattering things about potential candidates or incumbents in an election year, and they want, in theory, to make them stop talking. Then they could with potentially a slap lawsuit. So is that where we are? Is that what it is? Or is it an attempt to stop the spread of misinformation? It can go either way.
Well, and I think people who are viewers of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver know that he's been actually hit with slap suits multiple times.
Oh, yeah.
Because people did not like the things that he said, even though he was doing fact checking and he was looking into these things. A number of people have sued him and HBO over the years. So far, none of them have been successful.
Well, that's kind of the ins and outs of a slap lawsuit is you don't expect to be successful. The idea is just to make someone be quiet because they're not going to comment on pending litigation. So, for instance, one of these residents that's named in this lawsuit against Nextdoor is running for the Board of Trustees. So it's going to be hard to campaign against your opponent when you can't really speak about them.
Yeah, and that definitely adds a layer of complexity. Before we go, one of the things I wanted to mention, too, is that in your story, it talks about how Nextdoor didn't respond until which point a lawsuit was filed. I think a lot of people who deal with social networks kind of feel like sometimes, they don't really have a direct way to talk to somebody over there. And that seems to be something that is different than businesses past. Like back in the day, you would, have a letter to the editor, you could call the newspaper, and you would talk to somebody. Whereas I think nowadays with social media platforms, that's just not the way it seems to be done.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know better than maybe anyone that these algorithms and usage is very much weighted, and it depends on someone. So that's another aspect of this lawsuit is even though Nextdoor might not be responsible for what people are saying, they are responsible for the community organizers that they deem to be essentially the leaders of a certain network, and their political leanings could highlight or even delete posts that they're not particularly fond of. So in that way, should network do a better job of vetting certain leaders and making sure there's a political bias removed or journalistic integrity? Yeah. Interesting stuff. I can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah, I can't wait either. And I really hope you come back and keep us up and apprised about it.
You bet. Thanks.
Tiffany Ashaki, Birmingham Bloomfield Eagle. Thank you so much. You can find her work at cngnews.com.
Jer, man, you got a whole truckload of something sitting in your fridge. Tell the listeners what it is and why.
Well, if you follow us on Instagram, you will see the absurd pile of seltzer that was on my front porch yesterday. Thank you, Engineer Randy. Because we are doing a Michigan brand seltzer fizz fight. A fizz fight. And it's going to be great because we're going to go through, because I know a lot of people are drinking at home. A lot of people love these seltzers. I know that both Man About Town, Devin O'Reilly, and Engineer Randy Walker both are big fans of these. So the team has giddied up, gotten together, went out shopping. This is no PR, people. This is not sponsored content. We're going to dive in and see what's the most crushable. What do we like the most? What should you be drinking that's Michigan-based? And, of course, we'll include, for comparison, White Claw as kind of a benchmark.
White Claw, no law.
Right. When there's White Claws, there are no laws, sir. And we're going to have some fun with it. It's something that's going to air next week, but it's also going to be a great opportunity to get our little team together in a socially distanced way. I'm even putting athletic paint on the lawn right now for everybody.
That's amazing. I'd just like to point out, Jared, that I am not a fan of hard seltzer. I will not be imbibing. I'm probably going to BYOB to the party.
I mean, we got some left over of that Anteel tequila.
Yeah, but, I recognize that this is a thing that people like. I'm just a little bit of a skeptic, but it should be fun anyway.
For sure. The other thing to keep an eye on is that it looks like we're getting a heat wave, Sven.
It sure does. The latest forecast that I looked at showed that starting Thursday, today, temperatures are going to be at 90 degrees or above every single day through July 14th, which sounds totally brutal.
Yes.
I am not a fan of 90-degree weather. However, there's some slight consolation. According to MLive's chief meteorologist, Mark Torregrossa, the 90-degree weather is going to be a little bit unusual because it is going to accompany a dip in humidity that we normally experience when we get 90-degree weather. So it's going to be more dry out. Humidity makes any kind of heat feel hotter than it actually is. So that will be some relief. This reminds me of when I used to live in Tucson. I spent a summer living in Tucson where, and I remember there was a week, Jer, where the high temperatures for a week straight were between 114 and 116. Ooh. And, the joke there is everybody always goes, yeah, but it's a dry heat. There is no humidity in the air in Tucson, Arizona in the summertime. It's still hot. I mean, 116 degrees is just hot any way you slice it. But nevertheless, that will be some relief. The downside, I guess, is, as Mark Torregrossa puts out, and, I have to include this as Daily Detroit's resident green thumb, it's going to suck a lot of moisture out of your plants and the soil and everything. So it's going to be extra important to keep your cherished plants and landscaping features well watered.
For sure. And before I let people go, I need to tell folks about yet another cancellation, because I feel like, with all the cancellations in 2020, why can't we just cancel the rest of 2020? I'm
in favor.
If we end the year, will it be over? If we just to say, this year we're just doing a half year, we're done.
Yeah, I'm totally down with that.
The Jazz Fest has gone virtual this year, so we will have no in-person Jazz Fest.
Labor Day.
Yeah, Labor Day. And so it really seems like that calendar of cancellations, it just seems to creep. And the more and more folks I talk to, we didn't get our hands around this early on, and it seems like we're going to be in this situation for a while.
All right, well, that's going to do it for today's show, friends. Be sure to subscribe to us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Tell a friend about us. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And don't forget to support us as a member at patreon.com/Daily Detroit. With that, I'm Sven Gustafson.
And I'm Jarrett Stays. Take care of each other, and we'll get through this together. Talk with you tomorrow.